Welcome to a Danish English foreign policy update on Russia's reactions as Denmark convenes its foreign policy committee aimed tensions over Greenland and Arctic security. Today's foreign policy update focuses on rising tensions over Greenland, Russia's reaction to shifting global power dynamics, and Denmark's emergency response through the Foreign Policy Committee. As NATO unity is tested and Arctic security moves to the center of international politics, we break down what's happening, why it matters, and what comes next. Russian reactions and Denmark-US Greenland crisis. Let's take an overview. A rapid escalation of rhetoric surrounding Greenland has triggered strong reactions across Europe, cautious but pointed commentary in Russia, and an unusually serious institutional response in Denmark. The episode has become a stress test for NATO unity, Arctic security, and the norms of sovereignty in an era of renewed great power politics. Russian reactions, condemnation, irony, and restraint. Initial reactions in Russia were instinctively angry and condemnatory following US actions and statements framed by Moscow as violations of sovereignty. Russia's foreign ministry denounced what it called armed aggression and demanded respect for state independence. Russian officials repeatedly used the language of kidnapping and unacceptable violations, even as critics abroad noted the irony of such claims given Russia's own actions in Ukraine. Beyond official statements, Russian military bloggers and commentators adopted a sharper, ironic tone. They mocked the Western concept of a special operation, comparing American actions and rhetoric to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, an operation originally expected to be short and decisive, but now approaching its fourth year. In these circles, the Greenland debate is presented as a proof that international politics has entered a phase where power, not principles, determines outcomes. Despite the rhetoric, Moscow's practical response has been restrained. Russia has limited leverage and is managing the recent loss or weakening of close partners, including Syria and Venezuela. With constrained influence and ongoing war-related pressures, the Kremlin appears unwilling to escalate tensions with Washington over Greenland or the Arctic. Instead, it has largely stayed in the slipstream of China, which has also criticized the United States cautiously. Let's look at why the crisis benefits Moscow. From a strategic perspective, the Greenland controversy supports a core Russian narrative that the liberal international order has given way to a world governed by great power competition. If the United States openly challenges Danish sovereignty, Russia's commentators argue Western criticism of Moscow's actions in Ukraine loses moral authority. While Russia does not support US claims to Greenland, it benefits from the friction within NATO and from any weakening of Western unity. US statements and escalating rhetoric. The crisis intensified after senior figures close to the president, Donald Trump, publicly stated that Greenland should be part of the United States. Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy chief of staff, repeatedly questions Denmark's right to control Greenland, framing it as a colonial possession and asserting that US ownership will be natural and inevitable. Pressed on whether military force could be ruled out, Miller avoided direct answers, suggesting instead that no one would fight the United States over Greenland. Trump himself echoed the claim that US needs Greenland for national security, describing his interests as serious, though without a timeline. While a special US envoy later adopted a softer tone, rejecting annexation by force and expressing support for an independent Greenland with strong economic ties to the US, observers questioned how much influence this position holds within the White House. Denmark's response: Foreign Policy Committee convened. In Copenhagen, the government responded by convening the Foreign Policy Committee in an unusual late and highly secured meeting. Phones were left outside, the venue was specially protected, and even basic items such as coffee cups were prohibited. The move signaled that Danish authorities viewed the situation as a major foreign policy and security concern. The committee, composed of members of parliament, advises the government on matters of significant foreign and security policy. While the meeting did not necessarily signal an immediate policy shift, analysts noted that it reflected the seriousness of the situation and the desire to brief lawmakers candidly on ongoing diplomatic efforts. Commentators observed a change in Denmark's approach from seeking dialogue with Washington to clearly labeling US statements as unreasonable. The shift reflected a recognition that a negotiated solution may not exist under current conditions. European unity and an unprecedented statement. European leaders responded with a joint declaration emphasizing that Arctic security is a shared priority and that sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the inviolability of borders are universal principles. The statement affirmed that Greenland belongs to its people and that decisions concerning Greenland rest solely with Denmark and Greenland. The declaration underscored that both Denmark and the United States are NATO members and that the Arctic security must be achieved collectively in accordance with the UN Charter. It also highlighted existing defense cooperation, including the 1951 Defense Agreement between Denmark and the US. Analysts described the statement as nearly without precedent, Europe's most powerful leaders publicly and collectively pushing back against NATO's dominant military power. The episode revealed deep internal strain within the alliance, with Greenland's future as the focal point. Risks of escalation. Some observers warn that the European statement could further escalate tensions with Washington. Donald Trump has historically reacted unpredictably to public pushback, and analysts caution against assuming he would simply fall into line. One potential risk cited was the possibility that US support for Ukraine or broader European security could become entangled in negotiations over Greenland. At the same time, Denmark received explicit expressions of solidarity from across Europe, including warnings that any attack or threats against a NATO member would undermine the alliance itself. Greenland's position. Greenland's leadership firmly rejected any notion of annexation. The head of Greenland's self-government emphasized that Greenland is not something that can be taken over at will and highlighted intensified diplomatic efforts to assert Greenlandic sovereignty. The European declaration was welcomed as a crucial show of support at a moment when US rhetoric has intensified. Conclusion. The Greenland crisis has evolved into more than a bilateral dispute. For Russia, it validates a worldview in which power politics dominate and Western unity frays. For Denmark, it has prompted an unusual serious institutional response and a reliance on European solidarity. For NATO, it marks a rare and troubling moment of internal confrontation. The Arctic may be geographically remote, but the political consequences of this dispute are central to the future of transatlantic relations and the rules that govern international security. This has been a foreign policy update from Danish-InfoNews TV. Please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it to help bring clear, fact-based international coverage to wider audience. Thank you for watching and stay informed.